Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. My name is Gabe.
My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alistar the Minotaur, or colloquially known as Taylor.
Oh, hey.
Yes. And we're going to answer your questions, but first, I have a question. Alistar/Taylor and Jeff, how are you doing today?
Doing okay.
I'm doing pretty well. Just woke up a little bit ago, middle of a night shift stint, so just trying to keep myself conscious most of the time.
There you go.
Good. All right.
Yeah. So listeners, you've heard Taylor's name quite a bit. He's like the only person that consistently replies on Reddit, I think, to our social media questions.
That's right.
But yeah, we're glad to have you, Taylor. You've been a part of our Patreon for a while. You've taken part in our Patreon Roll20 games, and so it's cool to have you finally on the podcast.
Well, thank you guys very much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So as far as I'm doing this week, I've had kind of a very frustrating week, I guess. Our washer and dryer broke a little over a week ago.
Ooh.
And you know, whatever. I've never bought like a brand new washer and dryer, and we have money now, so I figured why not just go ahead and, order a new one instead of getting like a cheap one on Craigslist or whatever. And so we went to a local hardware store, a big box hardware store, picked out a washer and dryer that looked good, paid, a couple $1,000s, and then they were going to deliver them to us. And I took the day off work because they couldn't give me a specific time to expect them. And then I found out the day of, while I'm sitting at home during my work hours, I called them to find out, so when is it coming? And they were like, oh, it got rescheduled because it was out of stock. And they didn't bother to tell me. So I was very frustrated at that.
A little communication goes a long way.
A
Yeah.
little bit, yeah. So I went to the store. I yelled at the manager. I yelled at the salesman. They kept passing the blame around. And they didn't offer anything to make it better other than just, we'll just deliver it on this other day that you would also have to take the day off of work from. So I left. I went to another store, found the same one for cheaper on a sooner delivery date, and they could give me an exact time, so I know it's before I leave for work. So then I went back and just canceled my order at the previous one.
Right. Well, at least you had that option. That's at least you were able to get that going.
Just sticking it to the man, Gabe. Sticking it to the man.
I guess. I also complained to their corporate office on Twitter because, like, my time's valuable. I can't take every day off of work. I lost wages because they didn't bother to call me and tell me, hey, it's not coming on this day.
Right.
On the plus side, you did at least get it sorted out. And not only
That's
did you
true.
get it sorted out, but it benefited you to fix the problem.
It did. So as a result, I'm wearing pajamas right now because I don't have any clean clothes, and I still have to have clothes for work tomorrow. I'll have to figure something out.
Sure.
Another thing that's frustrating me is I was supposed to start this other job at my workplace. I was supposed to be moved to a different job 2 weeks ago, and they keep giving me the runaround too. They keep saying, oh, we'll move you on this day, and then we'll move you on this day. And I'm waiting for my team leader to get back from having COVID, and I don't know when that's going to be or why they need him to be there. Anyway. Frustrating week, listeners. That's the takeaway here. So the frustration is definitely going to come out in the podcast. What's something that frustrates you?
Oh God.
Sorry.
I'm scared.
Yeah. So I'm glad to have you here, Taylor. I hope we have a wonderful episode.
Yeah, it all rides on you, man.
No pressure. No pressure or anything.
No pressure.
Anyway. So, do you guys want to go ahead and jump right in?
Yeah.
For sure.
So, you guys I want you to imagine you're at the library and you find a door and you open the door and do you know what is behind the door?
Gabe, what's behind that door?
The dragon's hoard.
God, that hurt me. That physically caused me pain.
Yeah, I know. So, sorry, listeners, that wasn't great. But anyway, today's magic item was submitted by Dustin via Discord, and the item is Silent Conference Stones. Designed by a librarian for silent study groups, These slate stones have a flat base and a domed top with a central rune. Touching the rune links you to the stone. This allows you to telepathically communicate with anyone else linked to the same stone. Touching the stone again unlinks you. The stone's telepathic effect is limited to a range of 10 feet. Moving beyond the stone's effect unlinks you as well. So it's a pretty simple item. It's basically just a little stone you set down, you touch it, and then when, until you touch it again or step away, you have a telepathic link with other people who are similarly linked to the stone. So, you could use this to, I guess, in a library, you could use it to communicate without causing too much noise. But also, you could use it to communicate without getting the attention of bad guys, sending secret messages and such. What are some ideas you guys have for how to use something like this?
I mean, this would have been great in the game that you're running for the Patreon group.
Okay.
When we were in that tavern. We could have obviously used this to communicate perhaps a little better what our intentions were.
Sure.
Really, any point in time where you're in a public space and you need to be able to communicate without actually being able to speak would be great. So, yeah. Taverns and bars, restaurants. Does it specifically say whether or not it has to be like on a table surface? Because couldn't someone just put it in their pocket, have everyone around them touch the stone that's in their pocket, and then walk around and have telepathic communication within 10 feet of each other?
Yeah, I'm assuming that you can be mobile with this as long as just everybody stays close together. But I guess that would be interesting if there were different versions, maybe a stationary one that had a longer range or something as a trade-off.
I really like the idea, though.
Yeah. I definitely think that lack of communication amongst party members is definitely the bane of many a plan.
The leading cause of TPKs.
Yeah. As in the situation you were describing it, the party they maybe had a very light plan, but then once one of them starts talking to an NPC and they find out more information, the plan kind of goes to crap, and there isn't a way to form a new plan without verbally forming a new plan.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a Mike Tyson-esque everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth kind of situation.
Sure. Yeah, I remember in the Shackled City Adventure Path, there's a pair of NPCs that are kind of the first adventure is like there have been some disappearances in this town, and so the players sort of have to figure out what's causing it. It turns out it's some kidnappings, blah blah blah. But there are these two investigators, these two NPCs that are simultaneously investigating it along with the PCs. And one of the things that I always thought was really cool about this adventure is that the two of them have a telepathic bond from the spell Rary's telepathic bond, I think. The two investigators have that, and then they also are both have a bond with their superior. So at any point when the players are interacting with them, even if they do something one of them might not be aware of, they're constantly in communication with each other and sending that communication to an unseen third party. So it always struck me as a really cool way of conducting an investigation, because you can easily communicate with one another without tipping off the people that are directly in front of you. The short range, the 10-foot range is a bit of an obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
So, you'd have to be a little careful with that, I guess, but still, it's interesting idea.
Yeah. Players tend to come up with fairly complicated plans when it comes to getting through things with role playing. And yeah, it is one of those things where it's you can't really explain a complicated plan in character, even if the problem wasn't the other NPCs might hear us. It can still be kind of complicated to explain your plan in character. So being able to have that telepathic link where it's just sort of a hand wavy sort of okay, what you guys are talking about at the table is technically what's going on in your mind right now, or something like that. The DM could basically just be here's this item that lets you guys talk as a group, as long as you're within a certain amount of feet of each other. Obviously you're not going to be able to communicate at long distances, but as long as you're
sure,
within eye shot of each other, or in the same room, I'm going to allow you to be like, okay, the ideas that you're talking about at the table are getting across to each other's characters, so there's not really that like that awkwardness of like trying to let everybody know what your plan is. There's also like the whole thing where like some players don't want to tell the DM what they're doing because they want to try and get one over on the DM. So there's like this like secret planning that they're doing. So like they don't even want to talk to the other players about what they're doing, because then the DM will hear their plan, and they don't want the DM to know what they're doing because the DM's their enemy, and they want to get a step ahead of them. So I think having something like this and getting it out on the table, being like, hey, we're all playing this together, and like I understand that like, you know, like you, the person, are going to have different experiences than your character is going to have. So it's like that there's that weird communication there.
I think the other challenge is, as a DM and dealing with players when they're discussing what is happening actively, like in combat, is if they're talking to each other and formulating a plan or you know, kind of changing the plan as it goes. Obviously, they're speaking to the characters are speaking to each other, and likely scenario is that they're speaking in common because that's the language that they all share with one another. Well, most enemies that are at least intelligent also speak common. Yeah. So why would the enemies not react to what the players are saying or what the characters are saying?
Sure. Yeah. I always, in a lot of groups that I've played in, we've come up with some sort of a language that all of our characters know that is not very common to avoid that exact problem. You still have the problem of like, you know, you're talking to an NPC and then suddenly you start having a completely different conversation in an unknown language to someone else. And, oh no, we were just discussing groceries. You know, it's still a different problem, but that is something that, you know, well-coordinated groups tend to try to have some way to get around. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, this item is fairly simple. It does make us, you know, does have some prompt for other kinds of similar conversation and similar discussion. But yeah, the item itself, it's pretty straightforward. You can communicate telepathically, and that's always a benefit, I think. So, all right, I think that'll do it for the Dragon's Hoard for today. Once again, those were the Silent Conference Stones from Dustin via Discord. Thank you, Dustin. Jeff, if anybody else wanted to submit magic items to the Dragon's Hoard, or questions for us to discuss, or stories for the funeral pyre or other segments, how would they get those to us?
They can send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com or join us on our Interparty Discord at bit.ly/interpartydiscord.
All right, and before we go any further, we have a giveaway to give away today. As usual, we're giving away a copy of Unearthed Tips and Tricks Volume 2, courtesy of Crit Academy. Unearthed Tips and Tricks 2 is a supplement for players and DMs with 25 character concepts, 25 encounter concepts, 25 monster variants, 25 magic items, 25 DM tips, and 25 player tips, all from the Crit Academy podcast. So it's a great supplement full of tons of great stuff. So, Jeff, who is our winner of this great supplement today?
Today's winner is Zachary P.
Winner. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Yes, congratulations, Zachary P. You should be getting that in your email pretty soon. Be sure to leave Crit Academy a review and let them know what you think. The more reviews they get, the more attention they'll get from the internet. Also, the more they can improve on products in the future. So, big thank you to Crit Academy. Congratulations, Zachary P. Jeff, if anybody else wanted to enter this drawing and be like Zachary P. and win a free copy of this great supplement, how would they do that?
They could send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com with Unearthed Tips and Tricks Volume 2 in the subject line.
That's correct. You got to make sure that 2 is in there. I just realized today one of the entries that we've gotten is for Unearthed Tips and Tricks Volume 3.
They're getting ahead of it. Okay.
They're ahead of it, I guess.
Yeah,
I think since there is not an Unearthed Tips and Tricks Volume 3, I think I can manually put that in the right folder.
Sure. But no, they really want to be in that drawing for that first drawing for Volume 3.
I guess we can hang on to it.
I mean, it's a quality supplement. I can't blame them for wanting to be ahead of the curve.
I guess. All right. And next up, I want to thank all of our wonderful patrons for help making the show happen. Patreon is an online platform. You can pledge to donate a certain amount of money per month to the creator of your choice. If you head to ours at patreon.com/InterPartyConflict, we've got a few different reward tiers. We've got outtakes. We've got fantasy fiction that I've written. We've got a monthly bonus podcast, InterPatronConflict, which Jeff and I need to record February's episode sometime soon. I'm excited to talk about VR.
Yeah, that's right.
And then on the top tier, we have a monthly Roll20 game, which I also need to schedule that pretty soon as well. By the time this episode goes out, I'm going to try to have that episode that game scheduled. So
it's awesome and worth it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So if you head to patreon.com/InterPartyConflict, check out the rewards, see if anything appeals to you, and you can help out the show and get some cool stuff in return. And then let me also direct everybody to the other podcasts on the Crit Nation Fellowship. Check out Crit Academy, critacademy.com. Check out Brute Force and Ignorance. They're an actual play podcast. Check out the Kind GM podcast, which is full of advice for running a game. And check out D&D Character Lab, where Garen and Dan made characters every week and pitted them against each other to debate whose characters were better. And now, Taylor, is there anything that you want to tell our listeners to go and do?
So I just wanted to plug the vaccine. I know that this is probably a little outside the scope of the podcast typically, but I'm a nurse. I work in healthcare. I've been working in healthcare for about a decade and change now. And if you are available and able to get the vaccine, go do it. It is safe. It is effective. It's very important that we do this, obviously, globally, nationally, locally. And more importantly, I want to see human beings again sometime soon.
Yep.
I want to play Dungeons and Dragons. I want to see humans other than at work and at the grocery store. So this is the only way we do this. Please go get vaccinated if you can.
Yes. The sooner as everyone's vaccinated, the sooner we can all play D&D again. That's definitely within the scope of the show.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for everything you do, Taylor. Healthcare workers are a vital resource, and they should get paid more.
Absolutely.
All of them.
Tell me about it.
I'm pretty lucky. My work is going to be, as soon as it's able to, they're going to be giving all the employees the vaccine. So I'm excited about that.
Cool.
All right. Well, you guys want to go ahead and get into some questions?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right.
Our first question comes from Floofy Shoob on Discord, and they ask, apart from D&D, what are other games, genres, and systems that we have experience with?
Yeah. So we've had this on the list for a while. I kind of wanted to hang on to this for whenever we did have guests on, because I mean, Jeff and I haven't really played too many systems other than D&D, a small assortment here and there. But the ones we have played, we've talked about, about as much as we can. So yeah, Taylor, you've had a lot of experience with some other games other than D&D and such. So why don't you tell us about them?
So the list of games that I have experience with, from most experience to least experience, is Pathfinder 1st Edition, D&D 3.5, D&D 5e, World of Darkness, D20 Modern, the Fallout RPG system. This was released many years ago. Monster of the Week, Amazing Tales, Besom, the Warhammer 40k RPG, and Shadowrun.
Okay.
Obviously, like I said, I have the most experience in Pathfinder,
Sure.
Specifically in 1st Edition. I kind of came up in 3.5 and transferred over to Pathfinder kind of once 3.5 ran its course.
Sure.
And I've been playing mostly Pathfinder for them, but have gotten into a good bit of 5e since it's come out, just because it's so popular.
Sure. I recently started playing the Kingmaker computer game.
Yes.
And it is, I mean, I have some experience with Pathfinder 1st Edition, but like it's based on Pathfinder 1st Edition, so it's cool to be a part of that world and that rule set and everything again. Yeah, I want to ask about Monster of the Week, because I've been watching for the last couple months. I've been watching Supernatural, which is, it's one of the TV shows that is very much a Monster of the Week type show. Like that role-playing game was very much inspired by that, inspired by Buffy and so on. I kind of want to start playing that, possibly maybe for like one of our Patreon games or something in the future, because I think now that I've watched about 9 seasons of this show at this point, and that's a lot. And so I kind of want to see what it's like trying to play a game that is sort of like that. So like, what would you say have you run much of Monster of the Week or just played it?
I have not run. I've been a player. My girlfriend is actually running a game for us in Monster of the Week. Okay. We just recently started, and between the Adventure Zone, which I know you've listened to, Gabe, yeah. And then starting to play it myself, it's a lot of fun. It's a very loose system. There's far fewer rules, and it's much more narrative, I think, than your typical TTRPG. But it's a lot easier on the DM because you don't roll anything as the DM ever, period. Okay. Yeah. It's all the players, and you just kind of have to figure out what's going on, what you're doing, what's happening within the storyline. You tell the players, and then they have to come up with a response to it.
Sure.
I will say this much as a DM, just kind of seeing it from a player's perspective, mm-hmm. DMing more than probably 4 players, I would say, is unadvised.
Okay.
Just because there's no rules for initiative. There's no rules really like for combat other than do what seems narratively correct. And I feel like the more players you get involved, the more you kind of need some of that structure.
Yeah.
And that's not built into the system at all. So I feel like that would make it pretty challenging if you had, let's say, 5 or 6 players.
Sure.
It is a great system otherwise, though. There's a lot of option within the different classes that you can choose, and then options within the class itself. So, like, I'm playing an operative, or like the professional. So I'm a government agent, and my girlfriend's brother is playing as one of the monstrous characters. So he's actually a werewolf. And all of this is, again, baked right into the core rule book. Mm-hmm. I think there's one extra supplement out there right now, 1 or 2. But like largely it's all within the core rule book, which is, all things considered, much smaller than most, than the player's handbook or the core rule book of D&D. It's
sure
substantially easier.
Yeah, that's the thing about playing games that aren't D&D or Pathfinder, is that you don't have to read 300 pages in order to know the ins and outs of the game. Most of the time you just have to read, some much, much smaller document and then just play it, I guess.
Yeah.
It's interesting for me, again, coming up in 3.5, coming up in Pathfinder, and having these very, for lack of a better term, strict and pretty rigid rule sets. And then now that I've gotten older and I'm playing some of these more fluid systems, it was a difficult transition. I'm not going to say that it wasn't, but the more that I'm doing it, the better I feel I do as a player, as a role player, and also the better I do as a DM, because it's kind of forcing me to go beyond like the nuts and bolts of the system and kind of explore, I guess to a degree, like my imagination, but then also explore that character creation from a more, I guess, esoteric sense. Not just what is my character good at, like demonstrably because his ability score is high, but like, what is my character good at from a more personal sense?
Sure. Whenever I have played games that were much more narrative based than D&D, it is a hard transition, because D&D is, not only is D&D very, very combat based, but also it's not even just combat based. It's very encounter based.
Very much so.
It's very like, this role represents this specific action you're taking, and then that specific action prompts this other thing. And so when playing a game where a role might not be a specific action, it might be like an entire scene. And even just thinking of the game in terms of scenes instead of in terms of encounters, it's hard. It's hard, especially like the few times I've tried running a game like this. It's hard to not make the game about encounters. It's hard to not when we did for this last Halloween, we did this game. It was called Scream the Horror, I think. Scream the Horror RPG or something. And that one is pretty narrative based, pretty scene based, and so on. And I kept finding myself being like, okay, make a perception check. And it's like, oh, it's not really what other games are meant to do. And I still ended up doing that.
It's hard to break away from that.
It is hard
to break away from that.
So, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard transition into those types of games, but I would like to play more of them to be more able to make that transition. Cause like I would love to play a game where it is much more about, the player's personal character, where the character comes from in you instead of just, well, I've got this skill, and I've got this skill.
I know like I said, I have a lot of experience with those, a lot of like the D20 system, the D10 system. Mm-hmm. These are systems that, like you said, they're very like baked into the core of them is encounters and how you react to different things with your specific skill set, and not necessarily, in Monster of the Week in particular, you say, well, I want to do this thing. I want to try and talk to the matriarch of the family, and like you actually go ahead and say what you want to say, and then the person running the game, the dungeon master, then tells you, okay, well, you're going to roll using this skill.
Sure.
You don't say, well, I want to use my diplomacy skill, and then you roll your diplomacy skill and see how well you do. You actually tell the DM what you're saying, and then they determine what skill you're going to be using.
Sure. You mentioned the Fallout RPG?
Yes.
How is that? Like, because you said that one was pretty old?
Yeah, this was, I would say probably about 8 years ago that I played it, so I don't remember it as well as perhaps some of the others, but it was, you had obviously the three major races, human, ghoul, and super mutant, that you could play as, and then you would pick a class that the classes were pretty limited. A lot of your abilities came from feats that you would gain like at different levels. Mm-hmm. It was still the D20 system, and it was still pretty well. You could integrate it with any of the other, Dungeons and Dragons. It was a Dungeons and Dragons base, I guess.
Oh, I see.
But it was much more reliant around the feats that you took. That would kind of dictate what your character was able to do. Mm-hmm. It was fun. It was a good time, but. Sure. Out of all of them, not my favorite. Admittedly, it may have changed some since then.
Yeah,
I'm sure that they've come out with another edition that's hopefully improved on the previous iteration. But
yeah, I don't know how many people know this, but the Fallout video games were originally meant to be based on the D20 system. The like special stats that you have, like strength, perception, endurance. I don't know what the rest of them are.
Charisma, intelligence, agility, luck.
Yeah. Sure, there you go.
I've been playing a lot of Fallout 4.
Sure. Those stats were originally strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. But they I think they couldn't get the rights or something, so they were like, well, shoot, let's just make our own system and then use that instead.
Yeah.
So I guess it makes sense that that the Fallout RPG would just be an add-on for D&D, basically. Yeah, the aside from D&D, the RPGs that I played, like I talk about the Terrible RPG all the time. That's a really, really simple narrative-based RPG that that's what I always use as my way to try and get more into narrative-based games rather than mechanics-based games, because there's basically no mechanics to it. I've played a little bit of a game called Dogs in the Vineyard, which I don't remember much about it other than like when you make a character, you have a bunch of you can choose what all of your like traits and such are, and your traits could be like a personality trait, it could be a weapon that you have, it could be some sort of a catchphrase or something, and like you have a bunch of dice that you can assign to each of those, and then when you come to an so there's some sort of conflict, you can say, okay, well, I have a knife, so I'm going to threaten him with this knife, and then that means that you can roll the die that you have associated with that knife. If one of your traits is like, I'm a really good cook, and then I'm going to threaten him with a knife, and then I'm gonna, I don't know, mention I'm going to like cram this really stale bread or something down, whatever you can come up with for how you're going to use each of these traits, you can add those dice into this pool that you roll to overcome challenges or whatever. I guess the basic idea of that game is that everybody is playing a missionary cowboy, I guess. I've only played a few sessions of it, so I don't really know like what sort of stuff people have done story-wise. I think we like exorcised a demon from some guy that was possessed or something, but beyond that, it's mainly the mechanics that I remember. I've played a very, very small amount of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles role-playing game.
Yeah.
I want to play that so bad.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Well, yeah, it's mostly I've made characters in it. I'm looking on my nearby bookshelf and I don't have it here. It must be downstairs. But yeah, it's not just Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You can make characters based on any animal, and they have a whole bunch of different, examples of animals you can make, and then like you spend points to improve certain things, to make your animal more to let your animal be able to pass as a human while wearing a trench coat, for example, costs a few points. If you can play a bird that has arms and wings, and then that costs points as well. So there's a whole bunch of fun stuff you can do, like character creation wise. I haven't really had very much experience actually playing the game.
Yeah, because there's like different tiers of mutation or something. That's like you can have it where like the character is mostly a human, but you might have like some slight animal traits versus like, being basically mostly a wolf with like human intelligence or something. And then there's like the turtles would have been like somewhere in the middle, where it's like they're humanoid, but they're obviously turtles. Yeah,
I think for most of the traits or whatever, there's like 3 levels. There's none, there's partial, and full.
Mm-hmm.
So for appearance, if your appearance is none, you just look like whatever animal you are. If it's partial, you could pass as a human in a trench coat, like the turtles do. But if it's full, you look like a person, you look like a human, unless someone is like really studying you and they're like, well, wait a minute, your skin is kind of green and you're bald and you look kind of like a turtle or something. Similarly, like with arms or hands, if there's none, if you're a wolf with none for hands, you don't have hands, you just have paws. If it's partial, you can hold some things, but you're still like walking on, 4 legs and whatever. Maybe you're holding onto your weapons while you're walking. And then if it's full, you are able to use your arms as just normal arms. You can hold, you have standard dexterity, whatever. So with birds and bats, if you have none, you have no hands. Partial, you have hands on the ends of your wings, kind of. And then full, you have arms plus wings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just imagining a giraffe walking down New York City in a trench coat, like going up to a hot dog stand, like, yes, I would like some normal human food, please.
Yeah.
Just put lettuce on the bun, please.
Normal human with I have the same amount of neck bones as you do.
One thing about that game, though, is that it's based on the Palladium rule set or system, whatever. I've never played any other Palladium games, but one of the problems with Palladium, I've learned, is that a lot of things are left up to the dice and can wildly vary how powerful you are based on one single dice roll. So like the last time I remember trying to do anything with the Ninja Turtle RPG, my friend Tennessee Chris and we were like, okay, let's make characters. and we both rolled on whatever we were supposed to roll for. And because of like one single dice roll at the beginning, he ended up with twice as many skills and everything as I did, because he got a background that he was like raised in a lab. And so he had access to a lot of stuff that I didn't. Whereas I was just like, a natural mutation out in the wild. So he had like college training, college education or something, which gave him all these other skills. And I'm like, I'm a bit stronger than you, but I don't have any skills. So it was, our characters were wildly different in power based entirely on one or two dice rolls right at the beginning. So but then at the same time, if you were allowed to choose, then you would always choose the one that gives you the most skills, because that leads to the most everything else. So
that just sounds like a balancing issue.
Yeah, it's an older system. It's from like the mid to late 80s. So it's, I'm sure there is lots of stuff that if the system had continued to be popular as long as D&D has, it would probably be, errated or revised and such over the course of several editions. But
it would be on a new edition.
Yeah.
The one system I would recommend to people new to gaming, or like if you're trying to bring in either new people or young kids and stuff, is Amazing Tales.
Okay.
It's a very simplistic system. Anything that the core idea of the system is, if you roll a 6 or higher, you succeed. You get to choose 4 skills. One is a D12, one is a D10, one is a D8, and one is a D6.
Okay.
It might be 20 through 8, actually, now that I think about it. Regardless, and they can be anything that you want them to be. It's a very loose kind of idea.
Sure.
So, like when I created, we were running a Christmas one-shot, and we were all gingerbread people, but we were ourselves.
That's great.
So I chose as my D12 skill Dog Whisperer, because I love dogs and dogs love me. So any point in time where I felt that I could use that skill, I could try and justify it to the dungeon master, and then I could roll that D12, and if I got it's either a 5 or a 6 or better, I succeeded on that roll, and whatever I was hoping happened.
Sure.
It's a very simple system. There's not a lot that goes into it, and it's really, like I said, it's good for either new players or younger kids, probably like 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, to kind of get them into this mindset of playing a character, of role playing. I would very much recommend that one.
Cool. Yeah, I've heard about that game, and it I think other people have recommended it as just a really simple game to get into to tabletop role playing. So yeah, I'll have to check that one out.
There's 2 systems based on the Firefly series.
Oh yeah,
because there's the one that is based off of the show. There's one that is Firefly, the tabletop RPG, and then there is the Serenity tabletop RPG.
Right.
I don't remember which one it was, but I did build a character in one of them, and the one thing that I remember that stuck out was the I can't remember if it was skills or stats specifically, but like you would basically you'd rank up and die. Like you would be, if you were really good at something, you'd have a D12. Mm-hmm. You would use a D12 versus if you were kind of crap at something, you would be like a D4 or D6. I'm trying to remember more details about it, but it's been a really long time. And again, I can't remember which one it was because I think pretty sure they're completely different systems. It's just one was just piggybacking off of the show and one was piggybacking off of the movie. I think we were trying to set that up because we wanted to there's like a lot of I want to say there was a lot of like rules for like the travel between the planets and everything like that, because like the planetary system, the solar systems in the Firefly series are kind of like complex because it's like I think it's like several stars like in a very small cluster, so it's basically like a trinary system with planets all over the place. So like there's a lot of different places you go. And I think there was like some sort of chart to define like how long it was going to take you to get from one planet to the other, depending on like what, what time of the year it was, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah. And again, I can't remember if it was the Serenity one or not. I don't know.
Well, it's one of those two.
Both the movie and the TV show are just amazing. So if you haven't watched them, you should definitely watch them.
Absolutely. I got a Firefly board game for Christmas, and it looks really, really cool. I just haven't had a chance to play it.
That's right. You got a bunch of Firefly stuff this year.
I did. It kind of turned out to be a Firefly Christmas for me, I guess.
See, all the more reason to get the vaccine so we can get back together so that Gabe can
play some board game.
Serenity board game.
There you go. I just got the Friday the 13th board game as well, and I'm excited to play that too. So yes, get vaccinated.
Get vaccinated so we can play games.
Jeff, you just reminded me, I've never played it, but a long, long, long time ago, I purchased a PDF of the Army of Darkness role-playing game.
Oh, yeah?
Like, I think this might have been one of the first online purchases I ever made. This was years ago. I didn't even know what I was doing. Looking back, I don't know why I bought this, but whatever. I mean, I love Army of Darkness, whatever, but I think I want to try to run a game of this sometime. I have to read how it works first, but I backed the Wet Hot American Summer role-playing game on Kickstarter, and I ended up with several copies of it through various shenanigans, and it doesn't look like fun.
No,
I've never played it, but it doesn't seem like there's any rules to it. It's, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what my complaint was, but when I remember reading it and being like, but what's the gameplay? What do you do?
You're right.
What are the conflicts and how are those conflicts resolved?
Right. What do you actually do?
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we'll do one of those for the Patreon sometime. Maybe when summer comes around and it's not a dark, cold, bleak, frozen hellscape outside my window.
Just living in the northeast of the U.S.
Yeah. It's
just wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, geez. This Army of Darkness PDF is like 240 pages.
Ugh.
I played Starfinder. We're in a Starfinder campaign right now.
Yeah, how is Starfinder?
I forgot to mention that.
I've never actually played that one.
Starfinder is actually... So it's a lot of fun. We're still kind of getting the kinks knocked out of it right now. Each class is very... Its success is dependent on different things.
Sure.
So, like, the soldier is heavily dependent on the gear that you have as to how useful you are in combat, whereas a character like the Technomancer or the Mystic, who gets spells, are kind of useful no matter what. Mm-hmm. Like, they need some decent armor, but beyond that, they're always going to have their spells. Sure. Starship combat... we're still trying to figure it out a little bit, and then on top of it, we're using the rules as written in the book, and I know that there's an errata that came out that we haven't looked at yet, so we're still trying to work out the starship combat and see if we can get that to work a little bit better, but on the whole, I really enjoy Starfinder. That was my Christmas, was pretty much just a bunch of Starfinder books.
Sure.
My girlfriend really wants to play a Skittermander, which, if you don't know what that is, please look it up. It is simultaneously the most adorable thing in the whole wide world and utterly terrifying at the same time.
Jeez.
Skittermander?
Skittermander. Skittermander.
Oh, is that like...
Look up like their lore and their history, like, and how they function as a society. It's adorable.
They kind of look like Stitch in a way.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen these guys before, actually, now I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
As babies, they don't use their mouths. They have mouths on their stomachs, and they will just latch on to living beings and suck their blood.
What the heck?
And they will literally just drain, like 40 of them will jump on top of an animal and just drain it dry of all of its blood within hours.
Oh my goodness.
It's terrifying. But their society, all they want to do is be helpful. That's it. They were invaded by a highly aggressive, like, imperialistic race. So to help them invade their planet, they just simply like avoided them. They just weren't there ever. Whenever the military came through, they just like scattered, just to help them so that they could continue invading other planets.
Yeah, that's a way to do it, I guess. Minimize casualties by just getting out of the way.
What's the gosh, there's one playable race in Starfinder, and it's just like this big hulking like bug people or something.
Starfinder has more playable races than I think I've seen in any other system.
I guess
that I have ever
played. That's a good point. Like it's all about like space travel and stuff. So there's going to be a lot of variety.
You can literally play a jellyfish, like a jellyfish with a brain. It is a playable race. It's insanity.
Wizards of the Coast. When is Flumph gonna come out?
Yeah. The
give us Flumph. At least match Starfinder. One thing that I thought is really cool about a lot of RPGs, like you mentioned with Monster of the Week, and also I listened to an actual play of the Ghostbusters RPG for a while, and this is true with that one too. The GM doesn't really roll any dice. Whenever there is going to be some sort of whenever like there's an enemy or something, the enemy's actions are reliant on the player's failures. Like when the players fail, that's when bad things happen to them. I think in the Ghostbusters RPG, it's like anytime a player rolls under a certain amount, I think they have to roll like a ghost die or something, and then that determines whether anything bad happens or like what exactly happens. And in Monster of the Week, yeah, it's my understanding is that it's when the players fail, then the GM has the opportunity to have something bad happen to them. I also really, really like, though, in Monster of the Week specifically, failure is how you get experience. If you succeed on every roll, you aren't going to improve as a character. It's when you make a failure, when you fail a roll, that's when you get experience, and then you can use that later on to buy new abilities or level up or whatever. That is such a cool concept, and I wish more games had that kind of a mechanic.
I think the part of the challenge that we're currently experiencing is, as the DM, you have to limit the number of rolls that your players are doing. Because obviously you don't want them to become level 15 in one episode or one game session from level 2 because they just had a bunch of rolls and just didn't do very well on them. So there's a balancing act that you have to kind of do with that as the DM, and I think that just comes with experience. Yeah,
I kind of ran into that problem when I was running the Scream the Horror, because our regular listeners haven't been able to listen to this, but patrons can go listen to it whenever they want. While playing this, you kind of have to start killing players off eventually, because as the players die, they get added onto the villain. Like whenever someone fails a roll, the villain gets to do something, and then when someone dies, now the villain gets to do two things. Me and the player that died both get to act as the malevolent force. And so the game is you are kind of encouraged to get to that point at some point, but that only happens through failures. And there would be times where I would be like, okay, yeah, give me a perception check. And then they succeed. Okay. Give me another check. And so I kind of just like, I didn't know what to do other than just throw out more rolls that they had to make in order to get to that point. But I don't know. It's just getting out of, I mentioned earlier, is getting out of the mindset of rounds and encounters and so on. It leads to some difficulty that I'm sure is well known by people who have been in a similar situation as me. That's definitely one of my failings as a DM, is like I don't know how to get out of the D&D encounter based mindset.
Mm-hmm. Our next couple questions come from Fingers Fate on email, and they ask, is asking another party member's hit points metagaming? And then the other question is, should a DM ever punish players for metagaming, or is it their job to punish players at all?
Yeah. So we can tackle these in order, but they're both about metagaming, and I think that can lead to a good, total discussion.
Right.
The first part, would you guys say it's metagaming to ask someone's hit points?
Technically, yes.
Yeah.
And like, was it last episode or the episode before where we talked about looking at other people's player character sheets?
I think that was 2 weeks ago, 2 episodes ago.
Right, where it was like, is it cheating to look at somebody else's sheet? That kind of a thing. So it kind of plays into that a little bit, where like, if you're asking somebody what their hit points are, I mean, asking somebody what their max hit points versus what their current hit points are two different questions. But
sure,
I think technically yes, this is metagaming, but it is one of those things that is like. That doesn't mean that it's bad, because metagaming isn't inherently bad, because hit points in general are metagaming.
Correct. Yeah, hit points shouldn't really exist within the world, because you can do it if you want to, but that just raises so many other questions. Yes, it is metagaming to ask another player's hit points, but it's in the service of making the game run a little smoother. The characters can tell how beat up or how winded the other characters are. I'm not seeing through my character's eyes, so please give me just something that will let me know what my character is seeing, so I can make my character's judgment call for what I'm about to do.
Right. That's a very good point, because like the number is just there as a translation of what your character is seeing. It's like the Matrix, where they're looking at all the symbols coming down. And it's like, yeah, the people in the Matrix are seeing things as if it's a real life thing.
Yeah.
But the people outside of it is like, this is all what I don't know what this is. Give me a number here. What's going on?
So again, I would agree. Technically, yes, it is metagaming, but kind of to Gabe's point, if you think about it in terms of an adventuring party, let's say they're at level 12. Ostensibly, they would have been working together since level 2 or level 3 or whatever. So you would have, particularly if you're playing as like a cleric or a druid, any of the bard, any of the healing classes, you would have an idea as to how your allies function in combat, how they look in combat, how they work, and when they're getting tired, when they're getting beat up, when they're getting winded. So again, it's just adding a numerical value to this more esoteric idea of like, how's this dude doing? Sure. The other alternative is it's a new party. They're level 1, they're level 2, they're level 3, and they really haven't worked together too much before. So a small amount of damage is significant at those levels. So really, again, you just look at someone and go, "Oh wow, they got bonked on the head by a mace." Like they're not doing well. Yeah. There's no way they're doing well. So it's just adding a numerical value to something that your character should just kind of, by rights of being who they are and where they're at within their adventuring career, would kind of at least have an idea.
Yeah. I always find that the game is best when it's running smoothly, and if knowing someone's hit points is gonna help you know what the heck to do on your next turn, I'll let you do it. I want you to know what you're going to do on your next turn. That is, I would never want to stop you from knowing what you're going to do on your next turn.
I want you to be looking up what you're planning on doing during the other player's turns.
Exactly. So, I mean, some people are gonna find fun in, the quote unquote realism of, well, there's no way for me to know that he has, 12 out of 27 hit points left, so I'm going to just have to make some sort of a judgment call based on the type of attack he's been hit with previously or whatever. I know that Justin from Crit Academy has run games where he's the only one that knows where the players are at hit point wise. I think that's an interesting concept. If that's the point of the game, cool. Let me know how it goes. But to me, that just sounds like a lot of work on both the players and the DM's part. And so I would rather find the quote-unquote realism and find the role-playing and such with as few obstacles as possible. Like, I want to create the role-playing. I don't want the role-playing to be a result of information being like drip fed to me through mechanics, I guess. So I don't know. That yes, it is metagaming. However, like that is the kind of metagaming that is 100% good as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
I guess
it's like necessary.
Yes.
So yeah, the bigger discussion is, should the DM punish players for metagaming? It's a tough question. There isn't really a unilateral answer to that.
Punish. Basically, no. I think to answer the second part of the question, like, is it a DM's job to punish players? I don't think so. No. Like,
yeah.
I really dislike the word punish.
Sure.
In this, particularly in this context.
Yeah.
As a DM, again, we're talking about varying degrees of what metagaming is, and I know that you guys have talked about that numerous times before, but I think as a DM there are some ways that you can very easily circumvent metagame knowledge, or players using metagame knowledge, and that is to, as the DM, the beauty of being the DM is whatever you say goes, and you can change things at will.
Yep.
So your characters are fighting a frost giant, so you know that this frost giant is going to have immunity to cold and weakness to fire. Like that is inherent in what the frost giant is. Except this frost giant happened to have a ring of fire protection, so he also has resistance to fire as well. So there's a lot of things that again, punishing to me says like, no, you're bad, so I'm going to take some gold away, or doing something like that. But you can subvert metagaming very easily as the DM, and I feel like that's a much better route to take, particularly if it becomes a problem at your table.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of if you have a problem with the player, if you have an out of game problem, deal with it out of game. Don't ever punish a player for what you perceive to be bad etiquette. Like, if you have a problem with the player's etiquette, don't, your character takes extra damage. No, don't. What? No, that's not. No, that's just wrong. So like, if it's a big enough problem to do something about it, talk to them. That's going to solve the problem. If you have like a player that's cheating, for example, and you just, your character dies. Okay, they can just cheat another character. Like that's so far from actually dealing with the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, like a lot of kinds of metagaming, I think, really aren't a problem. They might irk you a little bit. They might be annoying, depending on your point of view, but most of them I find aren't really a problem to the game. Doesn't mean none of them are a problem to the game. Because here, I'll ask this question. Let's say you're running a pre-written module and a player shows up and it's clear that they know the module inside and out and they are using that to find all of the hidden stuff or to know all the monster's weaknesses.
Prepare for the combats perfectly.
Exactly, yeah. So like, in that case, should you not necessarily punish, but should you take measures to subvert that metagame in that case?
I think that you certainly should, like you said, talk to the player and tell them like, hey, I know that you know. Okay?
Right, yeah.
Like I know that you know. So can we just not do this? Can you try and play the game a little bit more to what your character would know versus what you as the player know.
Yeah.
But I am also I do have a bit of a fancy for subverting player expectations. It's kind of one of my favorite things to do. I'm not going to lie.
Sure. Yeah. Like, yeah, one of the players, like, they know, this bad guy is weak against fire. And then, he's actually got a spell that sends fire spells back at the caster. Whoops.
Right.
Something like that.
That's one of those things. Yeah. Like if you know that there's a player that knows the adventure, but hasn't exactly told you that, like, yeah, you can change stuff up, but like there is this thing that like people who are cheating, if they themselves feel cheated, they're going to be that much more upset about it, because it's like, I did all this work cheating, I should win, and I didn't win. I feel cheated. Like, it's so like, and you know that it might not be like somebody is like actively trying to cheat. They might have just like read the adventure one time and are now like, oh wait, I know this adventure. You know, and like, and kind of start, and they, you know, they might start playing metagaming it and stuff like that. But like, you know, they might try not to do too much, but there's only, you can't unlearn a thing. Like, it's not that easy. So like changing the way that like what you're saying, like if the monster's weak against fire, and like they've read the adventure and they know the monster's weak against fire, so they start preparing a bunch of fire spells, and then you go ahead and make it so it's actually weak against lightning instead because you just decided it. They're gonna feel like they've been cheated, and they're gonna resent you. They're gonna feel like you as a DM cheated. Like, it's like, this isn't right. This is how the adventure is supposed to go because I read it. Oops, wait, hold on. Like,
yeah.
So that's the beauty of being the DM is I can technically cheat as much as I well please.
Yeah, sure, yeah. But I mean, like, but you do have to be careful at a certain point. Like, the player are going to resent you for it. Like, if you're going too far outside the rules of the game, of like the written rules of the game, it can feel kind of like the player's being cheated. But
it definitely, there's a very thin line that you have to walk. If you're going to walk that line, you have to tread that line very carefully. Yeah,
and I think if it starts to get kind of dicey, like, I feel like that's the point where you need to like actually talk to the person outside the game. Like, if you feel like oh, okay, this is going to be a problem, I should bring up as like, have you read this adventure before? Like, you know, it's like, you know, would you mind like letting the rest of the group take the lead on a couple things so that there's, you know, there's some excitement to it and not just like, oh, you know what to do.
At some point I feel like, for me, I don't want to have to do extra work. Like, I'll change a thing here and there, but if it's getting to the point where I have to like completely change how the adventure is going just to subvert one player, like, that's where I'm gonna draw a line, not necessarily the line, but a line. Assuming everyone is mature to some degree, I feel like I'm not necessarily against, even if it is like, they know where all the secret doors are and they're gonna use them, whatever. Even that doesn't really bother me as much as it used to, because so many times I've run adventures like that, and I'm like, oh, nobody is searching this room to find this secret door.
Yeah.
If there is someone in the group that is going to find all of the cool stuff in the adventure, I would much rather, this has never happened, so don't think I've ever actually used this advice, but I would rather take that player and be like, look, I'm pretty sure you've read the adventure. That's fine. Just come up with an in-character reason for why you're finding all of this stuff.
Sure.
If you can put in the work to make your character's actions believable, then fine. You can have the rewards. They're in the adventure. I don't want these rewards to go unclaimed. So
like I wrote out the you know, I put the work into putting those in there, or to like getting the stuff prepared for them. And if we just don't use them at all, then like I was like, well, that kind of sucks. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but like having like an inside man when it comes to like railroading or something. It's like you have having a player that knows the deal, and he's basically going to be like,
guys, I think we should listen to this NPC saying some pretty good stuff.
Right. So like, you know, maybe without even actually talking to them, you can kind of like clue into each other that like, okay, I know that you know, but let's have fun with this. Like,
sure.
For sure.
Have either of you guys seen the D&D episode of Community?
No, I haven't. I remember my sister was watching that show, and it got to that episode, and she was like, immediately was calling me as like, is this what it's like? And I'm like, I haven't seen it. I don't know.
I mean, it's not sort of from what I remember, sort of. That episode apparently is not on Netflix. They removed that because at the beginning of the episode, Ken Jeong is apparently in like the cold open, I think he dresses up like a drow. And so he paints his face black.
Oh,
goodness.
And I mean, it's played as a gag, and everybody in the scene is like, "Dude, don't do that." But whatever, for that reason, presumably Netflix decided it was necessary to take that episode off. Whatever the case.
Right.
Oh, that was probably not the best.
Right.
Like, for those of us within the know, that's fine. For literally everyone else, that's bad.
Sure. It's
whether it was
for the best,
whether that was a good idea or not. The episode itself is actually very good, but the plot of the episode revolves around this like I'm not familiar enough with Community to know what the heck they're doing. It's like a group study group or something.
I've never watched it. I have no idea.
So it's this like college study group or whatever, and one of them decides to run a D&D game for the others, and he is running a pre-written module, and the one member that everybody hates, played by Chevy Chase, who's a huge jerk, they don't let him play. And so he goes and he buys the module and then learns where all the stuff is. And then he convinces the DM to run a separate game that is going concurrently with their game, where his character has gone and gotten all of the treasure and is using it to fight against the rest of the party.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's not a realistic scenario. So many things would have to, that's whatever. But
right.
I thought that is a fun idea for an episode of a TV show, at least. And like, if that was part of the idea of your D&D game, if you are purposely doing something like this, that'd be a neat thing to encounter in a game. Another player who is like, their character has meta knowledge of the adventure.
Yeah.
Or something. That would be really cool.
Just a full-on Deadpool. Just a full
pretty much,
Deadpool.
Yeah. So yeah, I think to answer the question, yes, it is metagaming, but that's not necessarily a problem, asking for hit points. But then I really don't think that the DM should be punishing anybody if there is behavior that they don't want in their game. They should deal with it out of game, because it's out of game behavior. And then, maybe even try to just not view metagaming as being unilaterally bad. There isn't really a single piece of advice that applies to everything. So not everything is universally good. Not everything is universally bad. So try to find a way to make it work, and only deal with the problem if you can't make the best of it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Great advice, as always.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for our regular questions for today, but we do still have our social media questions. Our last social media question was, do the characters you play tend to all have a common quirk or trait? If so, what is that quirk or trait? One common quirk or trait that my characters have is that they all have names. How about you, Jeff?
Shut up, Gabe. But I sometimes come up with names. I don't know. Like I've been getting better at coming up with names. Or at the very least, like,
I joke, but it hasn't been a problem for years.
Jeff's just playing John Doe and then John Doe 2. John Doe, more John Doe-ier.
Right. There's the little gag where it's a kid playing D&D for the first time and his character dies and he just writes Junior on the end of it.
Yeah.
And it says like, I'm so and so's son. I mean, like, that's not to say, Gabe, that it isn't still a problem. Like, I still have a hard time coming up with names. I just do it ahead of time now. So
Sure.
I'll put more work into doing the name, like, because it's like, I know if I don't have a name, it's gonna be that thing again. So I gotta figure it out. I gotta figure this out.
For me, I don't have any specific character traits or quirks that typically my characters have, but I tend to play a lot of clerics for some reason. I think it's more often born out of necessity than it is anything else, but I do also particularly like the class.
Sure.
So I guess if there's any quirk or trait that my characters, a lot of them share, it's that they're clerics or perform some sort of healing magic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like for a while every character I played had really low wisdom.
Sure.
I found it fun to play characters that had low wisdom, but then I ended up with I had a character that had a 6 wisdom, I think, and at one point I rolled a natural 1 and got a -1 on a perception check.
Oh no.
And I was like, okay, I gotta do something about this.
Sure.
I can't be the guy that rolls -1s on perception checks.
Your character was picking their nose and actually itched their brain.
Oops.
My
no.
character lost his foot.
Yes.
No, he's not an amputee. He just lost his foot.
Right, yeah. It's still technically on the end of his leg. He just doesn't know where it is.
He just doesn't know. I
think I have the same. I had the same thing for a while about charisma. Like most of my because I was like dumping all my stats into like strength and dexterity and constitution because I was mostly playing martial characters. But even if I was playing like a wizard or something like that, I was like, like I'm gonna be casting spells and fighting things. I don't like my charisma. Who cares? Like, I wasn't really focused on the role playing. And if I was gonna be role playing, I was gonna be like, me, the person talking my way through things. What versus like actually rolling the
diplomacy check or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
I guess one more thing that I think all of my characters share is I always have a lot of non-magical gear. Like I've always got a piece of charcoal. I've always got rope. I've always got sealing wax. I've always got an iron pot. All the stuff that's just in the book and nobody ever looks at. No, I've got all that stuff.
Yeah.
So no, what you're saying is no matter what, your character was always rolling disadvantage on stealth checks because everything in their pack clattered and clanged together.
Pretty much, yeah. So over on Facebook, we just got a couple. Sean M says, no, or at least I don't think so. I think I can unintentionally end up falling on old standards of leading the conversations when there's lots of dead air in a game, but that's not really a character thing. My characters will tend to be a bit quirky in some respect, full of himself halfling champion fighter, weird and mildly creepy tiefling warlock, less than smart but affable orc barbarian with a pet goat, but I'll also try to mix up the personalities. Right now I have a modest monk, see concern above about having to speak to keep the game going, and a kind and mostly quiet Oath of Ancients paladin going. I love my weird and wonderful. Think Bugs Bunny, Addams Family, Ren and Stimpy. So for the most part, that's a common aspect of most of my characters. I think I do that a lot too, where like I tend to lead the conversation a lot as well. I wonder what sort of experience I might have in real life that would lead to that. I don't know. So anyway, the next episode of our podcast. Wait, what? Adam B says they are all extremely outspoken and flamboyant. Probably because I rarely get to play, so I enjoy role playing when I get the chance. Yeah, that's fair. Over on Reddit, oh gosh, there's just this one person, Alistar the Minotaur. What's that about? Nobody on Twitter and on Discord, just got a few. The Beverage Tea says, I heavily lean toward gnomes so that I can be silly AF and stay in character. All of my gnomes perform the worst dance trends before battle. For example, line dancing alone, twerking while rhyming, hokey pokey, and whoops in between each body part.
No.
What in the world?
Oh, no.
Oh my.
I don't know. They are obnoxious and silly until the first blow is dealt, then it is super serious business. Stiltskin Koopo 84 says, a lot of my characters are showboats, striving for fame and renown. Many are heavy in constitution and wisdom, which tends to make them the big, burly type that's not afraid of escalation to violence in most social encounters. Though I like to play them as amiable and humorous, generally wanting to avoid blows if possible. Every now and then I'll go full-on glass cannon and make con my dump stat, focusing heavily on dex and some other offensive stat. These characters tend to be the more unhinged, certifiably crazy sort of characters that would only achieve comedy through prosperity. Fame and infamy are just two sides of the coin for these. Yeah. Collins B says, I end up being the de facto leader most of the time. My characters quickly get tired of endless discussions in their team and either take charge or jump into the fray first, or both. Chalk that up to my own impatient personality. I used to be frustrated with it until a friend told me, you have ADHD, therefore every character you ever play will have it as well. So get used to it and don't be embarrassed. And that's a good way to look at it, I guess. If you have a personality trait that you aren't a fan of, just say like, hey, it's part of the characters I play and I'm going to make the best of it.
Sure.
And then do that in real life too.
Yeah, that's true.
Make the best of your personality quirks. Dustin says, all of my characters have an accent. I never plan one, but all of them end up having one when I roleplay them.
I can understand that.
Yeah. Deborah Soar says, every one of my characters is left-handed.
Oh.
I never thought of that. That's an interesting quirk as well.
Okay, yeah.
F.A. Miller says, almost all my characters have some type of cooking or baking experience. There's no reason behind it, but that is a trait they all share. The only characters I've played that don't have any experience is an angsty noble and a literal child. Better teach that literal child some skills.
Yeah.
Cooking is a key life skill.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I grew up in a big family, 5 kids and 2 parents. So I learned to cook very early. Not cook well. I didn't learn to cook well until I was, I don't know, I think till I was married, really. But anyway.
Till you had to start cooking for someone else and you
guess,
realized, wow, I'm just eating like mostly high-octane jet fuel garbage.
Yeah, pretty much. Peace Joy Pancake says, I thought, hey, I don't think they really have much in common. But the thing about Jeff not naming his characters got me thinking. Mine almost all have elaborate names that I put a lot of thought and research in. Also, they are all one way or another motivated by family. Whether they want to protect them, get away from them, find them, or just earn a living to support them, family is always an important factor for my characters. Yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense with the games that she's played in our Roll20 games. Definitely. Autumn Wind, we just have a couple more. Autumn Wind says, I love having a character who has a tool proficiency. I also tend to play casters. I love the idea of crafting my own minor magical items, like a bard who leaves a calling card as an amulet that makes ocean sounds when held up to your ear, or a wizard that uses extra spell slots at the end of the day to cast continual flame on small items to be used as lanterns, or even a mundane character who whittles little idols. Yeah, those are all neat little quirks for various characters. And then finally, Potato Plunderer says, I end up playing a lot of lovable insert descriptor here. Tool, goofball, idiot. The kind person some might tussle their hair and go, oh, you. Yeah.
I think that's just me. That is just who I am. So sometimes it does tend to come out characters.
There you go. All right. So that was our last social media question. Our next social media question is, have you ever commissioned any custom artwork for a character or campaign? If so, show it to us. Have either of you commissioned any such thing?
Oh, I kind of have, actually. Now that I think about it.
I mean,
no, I don't think I still have the actual image. It was just a pencil drawing. It was high school, and there was a kid in my art class who was drawing some really good character art, and I was like, that's really good. And I basically just asked him if he could draw my D&D character at the time, which I can't remember what campaign it was. It was a long time ago. Anyway, the character was I think it was he used a spear or a halberd or something, and it had I wanted him to have 2 bucklers for whatever reason. I forget if there was some way to use both of them. I can't remember if there was a feat or something I was looking into at the time. I don't remember. But I don't know. I remember going up to a guy I was in high school with and being like, I like your art, and could you make this character? And he was like, sure. And I'm like, what do you want for it? And he was like, I don't know, nothing. I just like drawing. Yeah. So I it's possible I have it somewhere, because I have I basically have a shoebox full of old D&D stuff that maybe it's in there. Yeah. But then I also have, I didn't commission it. My friend Bridget actually commissioned it. Her brother does a lot of artwork and stuff, and he basically made me out to be a knight riding a turtle.
Yes. So it's a very, very good picture.
Yeah, I'm pretty.
That is very spot on.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's
very on brand for you.
Yeah, it's on my Facebook, so I'll have Gabe put it on one of our social medias or something, so you guys can see it.
I could put that as the picture.
Sure. Is that
Maybe.
my
We'll
current?
see.
Is it my current profile picture on Facebook? I think it is, actually, now that I think about it. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I don't often look at my own profile, so.
Yeah. I've commissioned a couple, like with some Patreon funds. I've commissioned a couple things. Like our friend Noah Wizard was recently like trying to just do, sell some arts. And so I commissioned a couple things from him of characters that I think characters from our actual play that we did a couple of years ago. I need to see if I can find those though. I don't remember what I did with them.
Yeah, like
But,
I think he sent me like a couple like early versions or something at some point.
Yeah. So nothing that I've done anything with, of course, but yeah, I've commissioned a couple, and I'm happy with them. I just haven't done anything with them, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor, have you?
I actually I did, not for one of my characters, but for my girlfriend's character in one of our recent campaigns. Her character Manasa Captain Manasa Calderosa, who is a Nagaji Blood Rager, if I remember correctly.
Blood Rager.
And yes, which is one of the coolest classes in all of Pathfinder First Edition.
It's so
Anyways,
cool.
I digress.
Yeah.
I had a piece commissioned of her character, and we actually have a full 2 foot or 3 foot by 2 foot picture of it framed, hanging in our dining room.
Cool.
I'll have to send it to the Discord, and I'll email it to you guys.
Yeah, if you do, I'll put it in the show notes.
It's really, really awesome. It was done by a guy named Robert Ardy, Ardy. He's out of Indonesia. He was on, I want to say it was either DeviantArt or ArtStation. I can't remember, but did absolutely phenomenal work. I could not recommend him higher.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. So I'm curious as to whether any of our listeners have, and if any of our listeners have, I would love to see some of those cool character portraits and such. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for our questions for today. But before we close out, let's wind down. Let's take a deep breath. Let's remember those who have come before us, who have given their lives so that we may have a better world to live in, as we toss another log onto the funeral pyre. All right, so today's funeral pyre was submitted by Kadzar via Reddit, and they say, I burned to death in a fire, got brought back as a revenant, and later on was killed permanently when I was disintegrated.
Oh no.
That's it.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's...
Disintegrate works really, really well for
It
getting rid
does.
of revenants.
So I guess let's raise a glass in memory of Kadzar's character as we say farewell again. Clink. All right, that'll do it for today. So thank you very much, Taylor, for coming on the podcast. Hopefully you had a good time.
It was a blast. Thanks for having me, guys.
And if anybody wants to reach you, you're on Reddit.
I'm on Discord with you guys as well, so...
Yeah. So yeah, everybody else, come on the Discord. You can hang out with us, hang out with Taylor, hang out with lots of other people. Cool stuff. All right. Well, to submit questions for us to discuss, items for the Dragon's Horde, or stories for the funeral pyre, please email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. For show notes, links to media mentioned on the show, and running lists of questions and magic items, go to interpartyconflict.com. Join the discussion on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Reddit. We're on our Interparty Discord. We're on Twitter @InPartyConflict. Check those out for our weekly social media questions. Your answers might end up on the show. You can find us on the podcatcher of your choice. We're on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you download podcasts. And I will say, if you're looking us up on Spotify, we are Inter-Party Conflict, like Interparty has a hyphen in it. My wife was like, hey, Gabe, why aren't you guys on Spotify? Every time I look for you, you're not there. And I'm like, I thought we've been on Spotify for the last year. What's wrong? And then no, it's on there. She just wasn't putting the hyphen.
The dash.
So anyway, please leave us a rating, leave us a review, subscribe, or just tell a friend. If you want to support the show monetarily, check out the rewards at patreon.com/interpartyconflict. We have a few different tiers, so anything you can spare, even $1 a month, would go towards making the show better and you'll get bonus content for it. Jeff, tell us about FriendQuest.
FriendQuest is a YouTube channel where you can watch us play video games, or you can join me over at twitch.tv/tiltedturtle to watch me play games live.
Yes. Also, head over to bit.ly/InterPartyConflict to take a short survey about our show. What you like, what you don't like, etc. And just for taking it, you'll get 2 free printable board games courtesy of Mary and Tom over at hollandspiel.com. And our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hackers RPG. And so, guys, until next time,
get vaccinated.